Live from the Busch Light Studios.
I love Arkansas. I love everything here. Give me that thing here. Woo!
On your favorite Arkansas sports talk station.
Why did that happen in Fayetteville, Arkansas?
Dixon Street. It'll get you.
Streaming live from
Hit that line.
.com.
You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
This is Halftime with Phil Elson, Matty T, and Matt Jenkins.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious...
Jones for the win. He got it. He got it. He got it. Mason Jones banks in a three with 0.1 seconds to play.
Hey, hold on. It's almost halftime.
Second hour halftime. We are now taking you on the downslope towards the start of your weekend here on ESPN Arkansas. HitThatLine.com. Phil Elson, Matt Smackdown Jenkins, Matty T. I'll go to the phones right now. Kiley McDaniel joining us for the second time on halftime. ESPN Major League Baseball insider covering prospects, the draft, much more. Kiley, good to have you on the show today. How are you? I don't hear anybody.
Sorry, I think I just got clicked in. Thanks for having me on.
There you are. I got you. Okay. So I'm reminded, Kiley, do you remember we had you on? I think it was it a day or 2 days before the shutdown affected us? And I know you and me were planning on meeting at Duty Noble Field to watch Arkansas, Mississippi
Yeah,
State.
I guess
so as soon as we had that conversation, that was it.
Yeah, it was a bit of hubris on my part thinking I'd be able to go to 3 SEC games in one weekend, and I got 0.
That's exactly right, man. That was we didn't get any SEC games this year. And I just kind of wonder, through your conversations with scouting directors or scouts or baseball executives, and you know, everybody's had to find a new way to do business, do whatever, not just in sports. But what they're trying to do in about a month, doing a draft without watching any of these players play for the 3 months leading up to the draft, to me is mind-blowing. From your conversations with these people, how are they going about this?
Yeah, I guess it's been beneficial that in the last few years the draft has become more of a year-round thing where you have, your 6 or 8 big summer events, the showcases, Cape Cod League, Team USA, collegiate and high school. And it used to be a little more of a send your area scouts, your sort of entry-level guys in a lot of cases, get your reports in, your cross-checkers and your more high-level guys will hit 1 or 2 events. And they go a couple things in the fall, and then in the spring they basically go see all the guys that everyone else has told them about. And almost no one has seen everybody. Everyone's working a little more regionally. That has shifted now where teams are using area scouts to do area scout type stuff, get your administrative stuff, get your list in order, but like your opinion isn't as important as the higher level guys. And the higher level guys, some guys are going to every event on the national basis. And so that combining with bigger staffs and more statistical models, there's more, TrackMan data from these events. They have video of every moment on the Cape Cod League, and they've got TrackMan running. Teams are building draft boards and having some level of certainty earlier and earlier in the process. And when things were starting to look a little grim in February, some teams were telling me, oh, yeah, we ran a mock draft in January before the season started, and we were kind of commenting, yeah, we kind of have enough to, have some level of confidence through our first 10 picks. We don't have all the info we need on everybody. Some guys might be popping up late that we don't get a full look at, but nobody would be getting a full look at them. We felt like and this is something that's, I've been hearing more and more the last year or two, that the teams that are, really on top of things, it's not that they don't need the spring, but they need it less and less. And so teams are now in a much better spot, whereas if they were doing this 15, 20 years ago, 20 years ago, there would be second-round picks that some teams have never heard of before. And so obviously trying to do that without a spring would be super difficult. And now it's a little more doable. It's challenging, but it's challenging in a similar way to everybody.
So, part of the idea of the draft is that high school, taking kids out of high school, there's a lot of upside, but there's a ton more risk. College players, you've got more of a track record. They've probably been coached a little bit better as well. And so you've seen more college players being drafted in recent years than prior. But as I look at your mock draft, what I'm gathering here is that because there's only 5 rounds, the risk of taking high schoolers might just be too risky for major league teams right now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on. So obviously, high school players in general are more risky. With fewer picks, if you miss on one, it hurts even more. You don't have the spring, so a lot of cases like Austin Hendrick I have projected for the top 10. He didn't play any games this spring. There's a kid out in Pennsylvania named Nick Betzko that shifted into this draft class from the 2021 draft class in January, and he had one heavily attended bullpen, and then he had two not heavily attended two appearances. I think it was 3 innings total over the summer, and that was it. Like, some teams have seen 3 innings total of a guy that they might give $3.5 million to, and some teams are on top of those players enough. Like, I know the Cleveland Indians, for instance, have full-time scouting employees, and all they do is go watch players for future draft classes so that they can build history with these guys. So they're obviously working ahead on those sorts of players to make those sorts of decisions. But not having the spring, and then, like you said, being riskier in general, and then the third part would be there's a deferral of the bonuses, and the bonuses didn't raise this year like they usually do, and so their expectation of what they're going to get paid and when they're going to get paid it is different, and so just meeting their demands is going to be different. And then on top of that, there also is the expectation there won't be deferrals, and there will be growth of bonuses 2 years from now or 3 years from now when they would go to college and come back out again. So it's not only are they getting paid less, it's that they're going to go back to getting paid what they were expected to get paid 2 or 3 years from now. And if they really believe in themselves that they're going to raise their draft stock in college, then that's also going to go up. And so the idea of the, like, on the fence, this guy wants $2.5 million, a couple teams might pay him. If things fall right, he might sign. That guy's odds go from 50-50 to 10%. Just the odds of all this stuff lining up are much lower now.
Speaking to Kiley McDaniel here on Halftime, Kiley, I want to talk to you about a couple Razorback players that are going to be in the draft. In the first one, you have him 7th overall in your mock draft, and that is Heston Kjerstad. Arguably, I would argue, a player that improved every year during his time at Arkansas. And I would even argue, too, is he the best hitter in this year's MLB draft?
Now, Kylie, I got to cut in real quick here. I am a Pittsburgh native. Even though I lived in Arkansas for 20 years, I still am a Pirates fan. I've called Razorback games, all of Kjerstad's games. I want Kjerstad to Pittsburgh. See if you can make them do it, please.
Well, the good news for you, it's early enough now, and this draft is weird enough that there are some picks in that first round where I don't have a ton of, like, confirmed, definite, this team is on this guy. They have made calls. They're trying to figure out what his number is. In the top 10, I do have something like that for every team, and I know that Kjerstad is on the short list for Pittsburgh. He's, like, if the draft sort of goes as expected, the first 3 or 4 guys go in the first 3 or 4 picks, and then they've got all those guys on the board, and they can narrow it down to 4 or 5, he will be one of them. So he is on the board in that sense. I can confirm as much as that. I don't know if I would say he's the best hitter. I think his sort of fit, so like Austin Martin and Torkelson, I think if you're going for power and contact, Martin contact, Torkelson power, those are probably the 2 best. And then I would say that next group would be Nick Gonzalez, New Mexico State, and Kjerstad, that are both in that sort of above average overall, well-rounded track record kind of guys. Obviously, you take the guy from Arkansas that played in the SEC for 3 years versus the guy that played in a bandbox in New Mexico State. So yeah, he's definitely in like the top 5 or 6 so of bats in the draft, and I think his appeal is a guy that performed for 3 years in the SEC. You got him this summer with a wood bat for Team USA. He has looked like a potential first-round pick for 3 straight years, and obviously with TrackMan being in the SEC, you've got data from like all of these events. Like, he is more of a safe potential everyday player. You can feel good about this. It's a high floor, but also not the highest ceiling. Whereas, like we're talking about, there's a whole glut of high school outfielders going right around him, and they might have a little more tools, a little higher ceiling. But again, for all the reasons we talked about, it's just a much riskier play, and the sort of buzz around Pittsburgh this year with a new regime in place is safer and college and quick to the majors and sort of arriving when they think they may be back in contention is sort of what they're looking for, all things being equal. And there's all kinds of defensible options at 7 this year.
I want to also ask you about Casey Martin, and on your big board you have him at number 40. You said that he's an 80-grade runner that can play shortstop and has average raw power, but his swing and overall contact ability have been long concerns. Previously, we were talking about how I felt like this year really hurt him in his draft stock, mainly just because we weren't able to play the full year. And the last few games that we saw of Casey Martin, he struggled with the breaking ball. He struggled laying off those pitches. What's your assumption of Casey Martin? Is he a lock for a 5-round MLB draft, or do you think he'd be better suited to return to Arkansas for another year?
He's one of those guys that, if you've been following sort of scouting long enough to remember, like, oh, this guy's a risky college upside pick in the first round, and then you go back 5 years later and see where they ended up. A lot of guys with this sort of track record end up, doing pretty good in lower minors because they've got the raw tools, they've performed to the SEC, things like that. And then once they get to about Double-A, it's like, well, it turns out once he got there, it's either power or it's patience or it's contact, maybe two of them, definitely not all three of them. And so from his perspective, he's got enough tools that if he puts up a crazy year in the SEC, then yeah, he'll go in the top 10 or 15 picks. But he'd probably go in the comp round early second at this point. And there's also the chance that, he gets hurt or something like that and, really falls off or is diminished in some way. So, I feel like in this situation, if it's this year or next year as a 22-year-old, junior, essentially he'll be treated like a senior signability-wise. I think just taking that comp or second-round money somewhere at about $2 million, somebody will take a shot on him there. And I think the only thing that's really happened is coming into the year, the expectation was he may be able to raise his stock and he can show some progress. He'll sneak into the back of the first round. Because he wasn't able to do that, some of the safer guys, like Nick Lofton at Baylor, not a super exciting guy, but he is a guy that is hit, contact, instincts, performance first. And so that guy, who's a less exciting player if you've watched them both, Casey Martin lights you up more. But like we said before, the draft is going to skew toward safety and things like that, and Casey isn't exactly the safest guy compared to those guys.
One last thing that I noticed with your mock drafts and their big boards and everything like that, the depth of the SEC talent is insane. And then you add in facilities, you add in the fan bases, just arguably some of the best fans in sports in general. But I guess I just want to ask you, how far ahead is the SEC amongst other baseball conferences?
Oh, it's not even close. My full family's from Alabama, so I grew up kind of watching the SEC, mostly in football, and then, kind of came into baseball later, obviously. In football, I think a lot of times you can be like, oh, top to bottom, it might be the best. The Big Ten's in the mix. The ACC, the very top of it is pretty good. The Big 12 every now and then, half of the Big 12 will be good. The Pac-12 comes and goes. And in baseball, there just, really isn't an argument. The top of the SEC, I think, can compete with the top of the SEC. But other than that, I don't think it's even close. It was actually funny. I think it was the last couple of years. If you look at a list of the top high school seniors who have enrolled and gotten to campus, and so usually it'll be the best sort of players with the seven-figure price tags and things like that, the highest upside that are showing up to campus. If you go through the top 50, it was something like 38 of them were going to SEC schools, and it was multiple kids from California that were going to SEC schools. It's just gotten to a point where you would think a kid in Southern California wouldn't see Mississippi State as a destination, but it's the programs are so much better that sort of cultural difference doesn't even translate. It's just I want to go where the best school is, and that's going to be one of the 4 or 5 schools on my list.
So as we head towards what we hope will be a baseball season, there's I guess there's a little bit of a fight over money between the owners and the players now. And I know you deal more with the player development side of things. Do you think that these two sides will be able to come together on some sort of formula that they can share the revenues that makes them both happy and makes fans happy? Because we all want baseball to return at some point, as long as it's done safely and equitably.
Yeah, this is something, and I know Jeff Passan talked about it on Get Up this morning. There is too much at stake, both in terms of PR and money and just sort of the the emotional recovery of the country. I don't have to explain to everybody what this stuff means. That if they think they can at least start a season, if not finish it, but it seems like they'll be able to start it, to fight over 10% of revenues and then just not have the season, it's sort of insane to think that they would actually let that hold up games happening. The problem is they're gearing up for a fight about 2 years from now for the CBA that starts in 2022. And so this agreement, or the one they had a couple months ago about trying to figure out what the draft will be and how the first set of agreements, I guess they might have another one. It was contentious because they were laying the groundwork for what will be a much bigger fight with much bigger ramifications for probably the next 10, 20 years. And so when it comes to the owners and the union fighting over this stuff, they're not just going to agree to what is reasonable. They're going to scratch and claw and fight and do it through the media for 3 weeks. If they're not going to report to spring training or have games for at least 3 weeks, they're going to take all 3 weeks. There's going to be a deal. The union has basically said we're not going to take just a percentage of revenues. That's not how this works, which I tend to agree. There's a lot of stuff that's happened in sort of corporate America, too, that when everyone's doing well, you get paid what your contract says, but when we're not doing well, you have to take a huge pay cut. And it's like, well, my salary doesn't go up when the revenues go up, so maybe it shouldn't go down quite as much when the revenues go down. Maybe these things should even out. That's basically what the union is saying, that just because you guys are losing money, we didn't get a raise when you guys were making money, so why don't we just, set a number and stick to it, and, we can see what happens. And so instead of pegging it to revenues, if the owners want to cut 30% more, and the players say we don't want to cut at all, they'll probably just settle on cutting 10%, or just using broad numbers like that. That's what'll happen. But they're going to get in a big fight over it before that, because everything's going to be a fight with the two sides.
Yeah, no, they don't trust each other. That's what it comes down to. Kylie, appreciate you joining us. It's always fun talking baseball with you. Hopefully, when we do it again, there'll be games to talk about.
Oh yeah, well, I'll catch up with you at a game at some point.
Absolutely. Kiley McDaniel, you can follow him on Twitter at Kiley McD. And it's worth the ESPN Plus membership to keep up with.